I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook baby.
Episode 69.
Bow, chicka, wow, wow. Oh yeah. Chicka, wow,
Today we're going to be talking about
And that's the episode.
G-rated films.
We're gonna talk about sex
Yeah.
because we jokingly said that last episode, and then we're like, actually, that's a good episode idea.
Yeah.
Not obviously talking about sex,
Yeah.
but talking about obscenity and sex in art. I guess
Yeah.
a lot of movies, maybe music,
Yeah.
books. I'm a big fan of very poorly written sex scenes, like in novels. I feel like they give an award every year, kind of like a Razzie, but for like bad sex scenes in novels. So let's get into that. Unless there's anything else you want to share. Have you been attending any? Oh, I was gonna say, have you been attending any satanic meetings lately? I'm actually finishing a movie tonight that is about satanic meetings.
Oh, really? What is it?
Yeah, it's not very good. It's called Satanic Panic.
Oh, I've heard of that. I have not heard very good things about
It's
it.
been on my list like forever. It was like at the bottom of my list on my, literally it's under my list on my Xfinity TV or whatever, and it's been down there for so long. Like when the oldest movie I had on there, I was gonna save it again for this Halloween. I was just waiting for it to become free. It's on Tubi now, and I really have it on there because I like the idea of Satanic Panic stuff. It's a very interesting time period to me.
Yeah.
And it has Jerry O'Connell, who I like a lot. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah.
He's on a podcast I like a lot. He's really funny, and he's in one scene. Unless he makes a reappearance. Yeah, so I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like how much I really kind of watch this for him. And anyway, it's not very good. It doesn't even take place during the Satanic Panic. It's like present day. It's like 2019. It's not the best. I hope it gets a little better.
Yeah,
but it's unfortunate. But yes, it's about like a satanic group of rich elites, and I think it's California, but I can't tell exactly.
Oh. Yeah, I haven't gone to. I did go to a gothic nightclub a few weeks ago. I probably will never go back to again. I mean, like it sucks because like the actual layout of the place is big. Like it's actually pretty cool. Like you go in, like there's kind of like a narrow little like hall to get in, and they have like this outdoor. Like a water fountain and like a bar and a stage, and they were doing some performances, and then they have like another like sort of nightclub area, and then it's like an upstairs area with a couch and another bar. So it's actually like it's just like this really big gothic thing. But first it's just fucking expensive. So it's like the cheapest parking there within walking distance is $20.
Damn.
I know, yeah. And then to get in, it's like $10 to get in, and then drinks. So it's like you had to spend like $50 or $60 just, and it gets crazy packed. There's no limit. I think they just like cram everybody in. So it's like you're playing football. You're just constantly getting like thrashed around. So it's
is everyone like dressed in goth shit, or is it just like a normal bar?
Yeah, no, it's everyone's in on the guy. You know, it's funny. I was waiting in line. It's just a whole bunch of freaks, right? And then so I actually saw, and so this is right off of Hollywood Boulevard. And so my friend TJ, I saw him pass by, and so I texted him like, "Hey, dude, I think I just saw you right off of Hollywood Boulevard." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I saw that. There were a bunch of freaks in that line there." I was like, "Yeah, I was there, man." Yeah, it was all right. I had a notebook and I got some writing done, but if it wasn't so damn crowded, I wouldn't mind quite as much, but it's expensive just to go out for this one thing. And then
no thanks.
Packed. So I don't
you should go up into the what's the place where you took me that's like up the ladder where the band used to hang out.
Oh, the Hollywood Vampires.
Yeah. You should just go up there like curled up in the corner with like a notebook. They were like, "What is that guy doing?" He's like a cloak and a hood and a cloak.
I remember the first time I went there actually at the Rainbow. I remember there was
the Rainbow. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are two tiny little tables up there, and then so one couple they go up like this old like strung out like hippie couple, and started doing cocaine right off the table. And it was funny. The guy's like, "Hey, you want some?" And I was like, "No, thanks, man." I wanted to like call the police because they're using a straw. Like straws are illegal in California. It's like you guys can't be doing that. Like
really,
it's illegal.
That's honestly probably what you would get in trouble for in LA.
Yeah, they wouldn't mind the
using
cocaine.
A plastic straw, not the cocaine. Not this the what's fentanyl saturated cocaine.
Yeah. Like if you're like shooting up heroin, it's like, hey, you littered, you put you left the needle on the ground. You got to pick that up. You know.
Yeah. No, I don't care about that.
But yeah, there is a satanic ritual thing coming up in May that I'm probably gonna go to. So hopefully.
The most metal of all months. Flowers in bloom.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about sex, baby.
Okay, so when a man loves a woman very much,
when a man loves a woman. So what I did was I looked at every movie on my movie list, which I'm starting a new one. I decided that my movie year is going to go from Oscars to Oscars. It makes sense. I don't know why I didn't do that before.
Yeah.
But so I kind of scrolled it and I looked at every movie and then like was there any sex in it at all? And like pretty broad.
Yeah.
And I watch movies from all over. A lot of 2022, of course, but like all over. And there's like very little in terms of like the sex scene anymore, I've noticed. Where, and I kind of broke them into categories, like where there is any sex at all, it usually falls under either for comedic effect, sexual assault, or rape.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes like cut out, so it'll be like a couple in bed and then it cuts to after, so like it kind of just goes over sex. Like the point is that they had sex, not what the sex was.
Yeah.
Or it's like part of the plot itself. An example being like the movie X, where they're shooting a porno. Red Rocket, which is a very good movie, by the way. I feel like it was very under the radar. 2021, where the main character, the protagonist, is an porn star, male porn star, and he's recruiting a young girl, like actually a minor, basically grooming her, honestly, into the porn industry, and then breaking the waves, which is more the opposite of this, but it's about a beautiful movie about a guy who is he becomes paralyzed, and he kind of commands his wife to go have sex with men and tell him about it. Very controversial in how you read that, but amazing movie. But yeah, so that's like part of the plot. It's not really about, and in that movie, the sex that does happen, really, there's a little out of love. And that movie is from 1996, so it's not new. Or it's like sexual assault.
Right.
But anyway, a lot of this is like, it's surprising to me because the sex scene used to be a thing.
Yeah.
And I think the combination of the accessibility to porn,
right,
and then just kind of, I guess, people's tastes in general. Maybe it was bland to just have the beautiful couple always, just having sex at some point in the movie. Maybe it was like, well, we don't need this anymore. There's more interesting things.
Right.
And I don't know how you feel about it. I can go through some specifics.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's interesting. Because it seems like sex scenes, there have not been very many controversies in recent years around a sex scene in a movie that I can think of, at least. But it's like, whenever, so like maybe like Basic Instinct or something, or like, Showgirls or something where it's like, oh man, this is a scandalous movie sort of thing. But yeah, it is interesting. Just kind of seem like I wonder if it's sort of like, yeah, well, if we make it, maybe it does have to do with the accessibility of porn, that it's just sort of like we just.
I also think that's part of it. I mean, porn is one of the things that like still I think is taboo to a lot of people to say that you watch it and you could find it in 2 seconds. You could find an unlimited, like infinite supply of porn, when on many different mediums. But I know that used to be more of a thing, and sometimes when I do watch an older movie and there is a sex scene, it's almost like surprising. It's like, oh yeah, they do this. Like I just watched Body Heat. Do you remember? You've seen Body Heat?
I haven't, but is that Brian De Palma though? Or am I
Oh,
thinking of?
did he direct it? I'm not positive.
Or was that Body Double?
I don't
I know.
know.
I know he directed a body movie.
Oh,
Or two.
okay. Well, this movie does have a lot of sex in it, and it is
Mm.
like there's like the sex scene, but there's definitely a lot of sex
Yeah.
between the protagonist, who's a lawyer, and he falls for this like femme fatale character.
Yeah.
I won't give it away because I don't think actually it's a movie that I remember reading. There's a blurb about it in my Wills, Trusts, and Estates textbook, and we read about it, and it's like, so he makes a mistake in it, and it's about this not archaic, but this rule called the rule against perpetuities, which is like a lawyer joke. It's like this rule you learn in law school that you really never use, or you do, and it's just like this really confusing, weird thing that's kind of like a punchline for lawyer jokes.
Right.
Like I see, like I follow a lawyer meme account, and they bring it up a lot. It's this weird thing about like vested interest and 21 years and like willing stuff to people and like putting it in a will, and if you don't do it correctly it could nullify the will, which is like a plot point in this movie. But anyway, not to get sidetracked. So I kind of jumped the gun. Also, we were going to talk a little bit about the legal history of obscenity.
Yeah, that could be kind of an interesting thing because it might be also kind of fun to talk about, sort of like the ups and downs, like the ebbs and flows of what was considered taboo and what's not considered taboo, and then what became taboo again, sort of thing. So yeah, you want to talk a little bit about like the legal definition of obscenity?
Sure. So the legal definition now, and this is speech that's not protected by the First Amendment. So I'm on Cornell Law School here. Is a pretty standard kind of site for looking up legal stuff. And it's like, so obscenity is a category of speech unprotected by the First Amendment. Obscenity laws are concerned with prohibiting lewd, filthy, or disgusting words or pictures. And this is, I think, something that does change with taste, like one of those areas of law that is like very cultural.
Yeah.
Like things that change just from generation to generation.
Yeah.
This is where the famous line that I know we've said on the show before, I know it when I see it. And this was Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart.
Was that like in the mid to late 60s? When
it was
said?
64. Yeah. We described the threshold for obscenity in the case Jacobellis versus Ohio. And he says, I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, hardcore pornography, and perhaps I can never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it. And the motion picture involved in this case is not that. It's one of the best known phrases in the history of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So I know we talked about the Miller test. I think on our first ever episode, this was a 1973 case, which has the current standard for obscenity. So it has 3 parts, and you need all 3 for it to be considered obscene. So it's contemporary community standards, offensive sexual conduct, and whether work taken as a whole lacks serious artistic, literary, political, or scientific value. I think so. That last one you can tell, like, even if you don't have a legal background, you could probably tell like that's the one that's going to keep lots of, let's say, pieces of art, so to speak, from becoming deemed obscene. Because a lot of times you can point to something that says this has artistic value, says literary value. These are kind of subjective terms.
Right.
I don't know how often obscenity is actually kind of prosecuted anymore. I think during the and this was actually sort of a backlash. So the Miller case, I think, actually stems out of California. I think somewhere in Orange County, there was some publication that a kid opened in front of his mom. And then I think it was Newport Beach. And then, she sued or whatever, basically saying you exposed my child to this.
Right.
And the Miller was the I guess the publisher, the writer, the editor. And this was, I think, a backlash to the 60s, where it was, even though I think this is a high standard, like it was still something. to all the craziness that was going on in the 60s. I think I think we do tend to glorify the hippie movement of the 60s.
Yeah.
And that like, because there are a lot of good things did come out of it, like the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
But like cultural issues happened in the 60s that there's a backlash that I think went on for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
In terms of drugs and free love and all those things. That really, there's a much darker side to it than sometimes I think people now tend to talk about.
Yeah.
I guess that's really it. I don't think we have to go through the other cases, but that's the standard now. And I think a lot of people would say like most stuff, like they don't even think about obscenity as being an issue for art anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting how a certain term gets associated with art or media that's considered offensive. So, for example, like in Nazi Germany, like the word that they used to describe art that they didn't like was degenerate. For a long time in the U.S., particularly with the religious right, when it came to sex on TV and in music and in films, the term was obscene. And nowadays it's problematic. Like that's the term that we use to describe things. So it's just weird. We have to. There's one term that describes all the things that we don't like in a specific generation or specific era. What's funny to me is that I mean. It seems like there are kind of waves of what's considered obscene depictions of sexuality. So, for example, to give you a more specific example, so in the 1970s, we've talked about our love of 1970s cinema, and that was a time when the MPAA was starting to loosen up, and so filmmakers were like, okay, we can be a little more graphic with violence and sex and profanity and etc. And so, what's his name? He's a director. He directed like An American Werewolf in London. He did I forgot it. Let me pull it up real quick. Oh, John Landis. John Landis is his name. He's done some good movies. So in the 1970s, he did a movie called Kentucky Fried Movie. And it was just a bunch of parodies of other movies. And there was a sex scene towards the end. It's not super graphic, but it goes on for a long time where the woman is thrusting on top of the guy. And then so that came out in like 77, 76, I think. But then a few years later, in 1981 or 82, when he did An American Werewolf in London, there's a scene that takes place in a porno theater, and it's a similar. It's again, the woman's on top, but it's projected in the background, and he got hit on by the MPAA saying this is obscene. This is you got to cut some frames out of the background porno thing, even though it wasn't pornographic. It was almost the exact like, and he was talking about this in an interview in the early 80s. It's like it's weird because it was almost the exact same shot, like from that I did a few years ago. That was fine in the 70s, but in the 80s, because of the Reagan era, and now we're all very conservative. Now sex is bad, but violence is okay. So it just seems weird. It's like, okay, things you can be a little more sexual, you can show more sexuality. Okay, now you can't. And now we're kind of since the 80s, like we've kind of loosened up quite a bit more. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like what's taboo tends to kind of fluctuate quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's more of what we want to talk about, and it's funny to me because, well, I guess we're in like the most. I mean, maybe there are parts of the 60s where this wasn't the case, where this doesn't ring true, but I think we're in like the most, I guess, like sex positive time that we've ever been in as a culture.
Right.
And yet our media, I think, shows the least amount of sex. And in terms of, I mean, that being said, 50 Shades of Grey was the bestseller like a decade ago.
Right.
And I think that is there's always going to be an erotic subgenre, but let's say more like mainstream stuff. The mainstream movies, if you went to a movie theater on a Saturday night in 1997, I think you'd see a lot more. There'd be a lot more movies where a huge, like a pivotal moment in the movie is a couple having sex, probably like definitely a heterosexual couple having sex. And that's just like not the case anymore. And and I was like I said, I was looking through all the literally every movie I watched last year, and so many of them, or like so few of them, had that. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing.
Sure.
I just like, and I think here one example I pulled up was The Northman. This came out in 2022. At the beginning of 2022, you have it's a like I guess medieval epic with two like gorgeous people.
Yeah.
Is it Eric Skarsgård?
It's one of the Skarsgårds. There's that
Yeah.
family just keeps getting bigger and
Yeah,
bigger.
yeah, who's just like big, like literal Viking man,
Yeah.
muscular, blonde, very handsome guy, and then Anya Taylor-Joy, who's like beautiful, you
Right.
know,
Angelic, yeah.
yeah, angelic, amazing body, and I couldn't remember actually if there was a sex scene. I was like, I know she gets pregnant, so
Yeah.
they have sex, but is there a sex scene? And I go and I look and I went on YouTube and I typed it in and no, he's in like a warm like a hot spring almost, you know,
Yeah.
shirtless and she kind of walks behind him and eventually joins him in the hot spring and they embrace and kiss and then it cuts. And like
I thought I remembered, or maybe I think it was just the aftermath though of the sex scene, because I do remember them laying together in the woods and they were naked, but it was very artfully depicted. It wasn't like, I felt like they kind of strategically covered up.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. That's what came up when I looked it up. I can't remember one.
Yeah.
And maybe there was. So if I'm wrong on this, then that's fine.
Right.
But let's say that what happened was what you and I are saying now.
Right.
That it was like the aftermath. If this movie came out in 2002 or 1992 or 1982,
yeah,
they would fuck on camera.
Yeah,
like there definitely would have been a sex scene there. Right. And that's just interesting to me that culturally, like there's not a chance that the director wouldn't have, because people would probably go to the theater to see that.
Yeah.
To see these two beautiful actors have sex, and
right.
And I just think that's again, I could be wrong. Maybe they do.
Yeah.
The fact that it didn't stick with me is like maybe that's also part of it.
I also wonder if like you know, there were a lot of shows like on HBO and Showtime where they got a lot more explicit with sex. So maybe it just seemed like, you know, where it's like, oh yeah, but you know, I like going to the movie theaters to see the scandalous sex scene that doesn't seem as big now when I could just turn on Game of Thrones or some other thing. It's like, okay, yeah, there's tons of.
Sorry, I looked up.
What'd you look up?
So I look at like the Parents Guide. You ever do that?
Oh yeah. Kids in Mind or
Northmen?
whatever, or it's IMDb.
Yeah. So sex and nudity. IMDb the North. Some male buttocks nudity in a non-graphic way. Then it is naked male corpse, penis shown. Two men fight each other naked. No genitals shown in this scene as there are heavy shadows, but some buttocks are available. A woman sexually kisses her adult son. At a distance, protagonist and woman have sex in a forest with thrusting. Oh, okay. With thrusting briefly shown, as well as the man's buttocks. So that is the sex scene right there. So there was one. But it was like from a distance, thrusting briefly shown. Like that's not what it would look like if it came out 20 years ago. Maybe even 10 years ago. Maybe 2012. I think this would have been different.
Those Parents guys, they used to be much more Wild West, like, because I think those are mostly user generated. I think they're more moderated now, but I remember when they first introduced those a while back, like people just put the weirdest shit in there. And I remember reading one. It was the Parents Guide for Batman and Robin, I think. And so because I think like you can put like, you know, moderate, severe, or no, or like you can indicate like how explicit the content is. And somebody put explicit, even though the movie's PG-13, but they wrote, like, you know, Batman and Robin go to a gay orgy. Batman gets cum in his eye, then he has to wear an eye patch for the rest of the movie.
These are always funny because they're so. It's like like reading a deposition of a comedy show or something. Like they're very like penis shown. Okay, so there is a sex scene in Northman, but I'd say it's pretty restrained compared to what not that every movie should be. What's that movie that has infamous sex? Is it Last Tango in Paris?
Oh yeah, that was like, from the early 70s.
Totally like not cool, right? Where like basically someone raped someone else.
With the
well, we don't want
stick
that.
Of butter.
Stick of butter.
Oh yeah, so there's a I haven't seen the movie, but so Marlon Brando is in. He plays the male lead in that one.
Brando, okay.
There's a part where I think he lubricates his junk with butter, and I guess he uses it on the woman.
The butter or his penis?
His penis on her, yeah.
All right. All right.
Um,
Is
yeah.
it like an old movie? Like I know not an old movie, but does it take place a while ago? They don't have lube.
I don't know actually.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think it was pornographic, but I know it's pretty graphic, especially for the early 70s.
Mm.
But yeah.
All right.
Oh, also they're
Um,
in Paris, so maybe they just have really good quality butter there. So it was just...
they do have great butter in Paris. That's true. It is divine.
You know, I was looking a little bit at the history of sex in film, and I looked up.
I'm sure
one
you
of the
were. Student research walk in. What is research?
I'll know it when I see it. But one of the first instances of sex in a movie was actually, it's not even sex, but it was considered sex in the late 1800s. It's a movie called The Kiss, which came out in 1896. It's a silent film. It's about 21 seconds long, and yeah, there's no sex in it. It's just a kiss. But I want to read the review of it. Someone's description of it real quick, because that's actually pretty fucking funny. So I got The Kiss right here.
I think I've seen that actually.
Yeah, it's one of the first. It was actually shot at Thomas Edison's film studio, which I think is in New Jersey.
New Jersey, yeah, in West Orange, where my dad's from.
Where is it? Oh, here it is. The spectacle. So this is one contemporary critic wrote: the spectacle of the prolonged pasturing on each other's lips was beastly enough in life size on the stage, but magnified to gargantuan proportions and repeated 3 times over, it is absolutely disgusting.
And that
it's like the most G-rated thing ever.
That actress was burned at the stake after that.
But yeah, it's like 21 seconds long, just a man and woman kissing. But yeah, it's funny, like it's that was considered sexual in the 1800s. And I like it was like, it's bad enough to see it in person in a play, but to see it embiggened on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't show your ankles back then, let alone kiss on screen.
Right.
That is one of the best. I think one of the best endings of any movie is Cinema Paradiso. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, well, I'm going to spoil it for you right now.
Yeah, that's fine. Go for it.
Basically, it's like it's a movie lovers movie. It's actually what I wrote at the end of my Fablemans review, where I'm like, if you want to watch a movie about the magic of movie making, watch Cinema Paradiso, or Hugo. I think is good too. I know people don't love Hugo, but Cinema Paradiso is pretty universally beloved. It's an Italian movie, and it's a kid who lives in, I think, like a small town in Italy, somewhere in Tuscany, I believe, maybe Lazio, and he works at a theater, and this is like old school. This is like old movies, like maybe the 20s or 30s or something.
Right.
And this is Italy, a very Catholic country. So the movies have to be literally edited, where like literally cut out of the film, or any kissing. I mean, I don't think there's any sex scenes in these, but like love embracing and kissing. So the guy he works for, who runs the theater, has to do that. He cuts them out, and then at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't seen this movie, at the end, the kid grows up. He becomes a kind of like a famous director. A lot happens in between then. He becomes a famous director in Rome, and he goes back to his town, and he goes to the theater, I think, which is closing, or he bought it or something like that. And this guy who had passed away had, I don't know, sutured together, like spliced together all of these scenes of just like people embracing and love. And it's like a really beautiful moment, because it's kiss after kiss that, like, after all these years that, the government and the church didn't let them show at the time, but now it's okay. And it's just this really, really beautiful moment.
I've actually seen that scene, mostly because Ennio Morricone, I know he did a beautiful score for that movie. A terrific theme that he wrote for violin, and so it plays over that scene. So I was like, oh, okay, why is this guy in a theater just watching all these people kissing?
Yeah.
So, okay, now
you have the context. Yeah, it's a really cool moment. It really ties that movie together, and it is a beautiful. I think, like, I don't know, I get kind of sick about movies about the magic of movie making. There's just so many of them. But this one, like, is a beautiful one.
Yeah. That's on my watch list for sure. But so the Hays Code in the US, it's funny because, like, I don't know the exact years, but I think like from like the 30s through the 50s, I think maybe even the 60s. But the Hays Code, it's interesting because like before the Hays Code, you were able to be a little more risque. Like obviously they weren't showing like nudity, and by the way, I'm talking about films in the U.S. by the way, but like you were able to be a little more risque. And but then the Hays Code came along. Like no, you got so they really clamped down on sexuality and even just kind of making jokes about it. You know that was really hard to get around. And then in the 60s things opened up and that led to the 70s. But it's funny like because a lot of I think in a weird way that restriction forced a lot of filmmakers to be clever by kind of including sex in films. Like okay, how can I do this in a way that that might go over their heads? Hitchcock I know was kind of infamous for implying sexual activity off screen to get around the Hays Code. So there's one scene, have you ever seen North by Northwest?
Yes.
Do you remember at the very end, like right after the big climactic showdown at the what are the four presidents' heads in the Mount Rushmore? Right. So right
Mount
after
Rushmore,
that,
yes.
after that big showdown, the main characters, the guy and the girl, they embrace. And they're on a train trip like across the U.S. And so they embrace, and then the train goes into a tunnel. And so like that was meant to like imply like, oh yeah, they're
yeah, like dick and vag.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah, it's a penis. So
Going
see,
into a
here's
vagina.
let me explain. So the penis, the
Going
train
into
is
a
a
hole.
penis.
Oh.
Yeah. And the
but
tunnel.
I like it feels so tame, obviously by today's
anatomy.
standards. But I mean, like,
yeah,
I do
no,
like,
and you do have to be clever.
yeah.
I didn't realize the Hays Code was like self-censorship.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. You can't show white slavery is on here. Regular slavery is cool. White slavery, no good. Miscegenation, Jesus. Yeah. Oh God. All right. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of North by Northwest, there's nothing to do with sex, but I remember this article. I don't remember what it was in. It might have been Slate or something. And it's just this like funny article about it was the coolest thing anyone has ever worn ever. And it was who is the Cary Grant?
Cary Grant, yeah.
Is that Cary Grant?
Yeah.
When he sits on the train, when he first meets the woman, and he wears those sunglasses, like they're kind of like this, like tortoiseshell sunglasses. It's like that's the coolest thing anyone has ever worn ever. I just thought that was like a fun. I'm like, oh shit, that's the scene. Like that's the scene from that article. And another meme from that movie that my friends and I use a lot is, remember when he's like at that mansion and he's sitting on the couch, he's like like really exaggerated breathing, and someone's just like pouring him a whiskey drink, just like he's filling up, and he's like like really, like we said that to each other all the time.
Yeah. There was another thing with so Hitchcock, he was fighting against censors a lot for even like making like, you know, like innuendos about sex. Like there was one line actually in North by Northwest where Cary Grant's talking to the female lead in that movie. I can't remember her name. He's talking to her and they're kind of flirting and they're on a train. And then she says a stupid line, like a dumb, nonsensical line, because the original line was, "I don't make love on a full stomach," I think. But the MPA was, no, you can't do that. You can't talk about making love. So she said, "I don't talk about love on an empty stomach." Like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, so Hitchcock was always kind of like, this is dumb. Like, I wanted to be kind of sexual, a little spicy, but now it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But,
so this being said, I'm not like yearning for the return of the sex scene. I think when it pops up, it'll be fun. It's like, oh shit, the sex scene's back.
Right.
An example of a movie that I think has one of the most ridiculous sex scenes I've ever seen is I've seen Munich.
Oh yeah, is that where he's flashbacking to violent shit?
Yeah, like Eric Bana is just like plowing his wife in it. He hasn't seen her in a while. The movie obviously is about the Mossad getting revenge on the 1972 Olympic attackers, just like one by one taking them out across, I think like mainly Europe.
Yeah.
And he's like back. I think he's in Brooklyn, and he's like railing his wife and just drenched in sweat, screaming, but it's in slow motion, and like the sound is cut, and it's like flashbacks to all these kills. All the, and it's like, I don't know. And this is Spielberg, right?
Right.
It's like, dude, what? Like, this scene was so jarring and took me so out of the movie. I don't, and that was like 2006, and maybe that movie killed the sex scene. I don't know, but that took me so far out of it, and it was just like, what was the decision making here?
It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
I mean, a couple years ago.
Was it just that he was so haunted by the shit that he was involved with that like he couldn't bang his wife without thinking about it? Like,
but it almost felt like he was getting off on it. Like he was, that's how I took it, was and I don't know if getting off on it is the right term, but like it wasn't making him impotent. It wasn't that. It was the opposite. He was going so hard that he was covered in sweat, like dripping sweat, and like just making him like scream. And I don't know. I found it very strange. One of the weirdest sex scenes I've witnessed. Yeah, let me see what else we got here. Yeah, I mean, you have Hellraiser, which is just like S&M and like torture sex stuff. There's some more like Crimes of the Future. You have sex as surgery, which is very cool. Like very cool take, but definitely not typical. In fact, like the old way, I think as they call it, the sex, like he says he doesn't do that anymore.
Right.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I think this came out, beautiful movie, came out 2019, I believe. And has, I think, one of the more typical sex scenes in a movie, but it's also gay, like it's lesbians. So I mean, of course, there's like the wrinkle there. So it's still not like a heterosexual couple sex scene.
Do you know what one of the first porn parodies of all time is?
One of the first porn parodies is, it's way before Pirates, right?
Oh yeah.
I want to say Vagina Town, but that's from a show on Chinatown. That was a parody in a show. That was in Californication.
Oh yeah.
He's making Vagina Town. He's like, this is my masterpiece. So my sister, my mother, my sister, my mother.
That's good. It's actually, it goes back quite a ways to
Debbie Does Dallas.
No, a little further back, to 1970. It's making fun of Batman. Do you
Really?
want to guess the title? Yeah, you want to guess the title? It's pretty funny. It's not clever at all.
The dark cock.
No. It's called Bat Pussy. I swear to God.
Sometimes it's so funny how not clever they are.
Yeah.
Do they still make like movies like that though?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I feel like it's kind of dead. Like,
yeah.
Pirates was a big deal, I feel like, when that came out, and that was like mid.
It had a huge budget. Didn't it have like $100 million budget or something? Like
Pirates?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Oh man, I don't know. There's a funny story. I think my high school football coach said that once. You know, like I don't know how they do it now. It's probably just like files, but back in the day, like even in the 2000s, you would like literally trade film. Like that's like to scout other teams, and one team gave us like a record. I don't know if it was a DVD or a VHS of, instead of the film of Debbie Does Dallas. It's like I forget if it was on purpose or not, but that was pretty funny.
Yeah, one of my friends had it, and then he's like, "I'm only watching it for the plot."
Yeah, buddy. All right, pal.
No,
all right, guy.
But I heard that there's another way. I don't think it was straight up a porno, but I think it was an adult sex comedy though. But it was making fun of Flash Gordon, and it was called Flesh Gordon.
That's better.
Yeah, a little better. Well, you know what's funny? So for a while, I was working on a horror script that I can't remember the exact premise of it, but I just had this idea of like some like dude who's like he's got the secret garden like on his estate and he's growing humans. Like I just remember like
Oh,
there's like limbs growing out of the ground and shit.
oh,
I
cool.
couldn't quite figure it out, and I was gonna call it Flesh Garden, but I was like,
Oh.
that sounds a little too porny. That's a little too much like Flesh Gordon. But
I remember watching this. I guess it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But
right.
I remember it's kind of a low budget movie called The Silver Scream.
Mm.
You ever seen that?
Nuh-uh.
It's obviously a take on like I guess I thought of it because of like kind of bad pun names like the Silver Screen, the Silver Scream, and it's like this girl who wants to make it real big in Hollywood, and she'll like basically sell her soul. And I just remember like to sell her soul, all she do is like blow the producer or something, and then she she kind of like grows and becomes this like very, I don't know, enigmatic and sultry, gorgeous woman. And I don't think it was a very good movie.
Mm.
This was before I was writing reviews for movies, so I can't really remember too much of it. But
Right. Did you know Andy Warhol kind of contributed to? So he made a movie in 1969 of all years called Blue Movie. It was the first adult erotic film depicting explicit sex to receive a wide theatrical release in the United States.
Oh, really?
It's Andy Warhol.
Blue Movie?
It's called a Blue Movie, yeah.
Mm.
And according to Warhol, a major influence in the making of Last Tango in Paris, which came out in 1972, an internationally controversial erotic drama film.
Yeah. I remember Deep Throat was a huge deal.
I remember, like, I've seen footage from the 70s of like older women going, like, I mean, like grandma, like aged women going to it.
That's what it was, like a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Just like people go out, like not like weirdos and sex theaters that don't really exist anymore. Just like like people just went to go see this movie that is so bizarre to me to think of now.
Right.
Especially because it wasn't just a sex movie; it was a movie about like women deep throating dick.
Yeah.
Like it's just like regular. Maybe people didn't know what it meant. So did the worst name ever for a code name, but it was like before or after the Deep Throat Watergate scandal. Was it after that?
I think the movie came out before.
The movie came out before.
So I'm pretty sure his nickname came out.
That's terrible. I don't know, because I was gonna say if it came out after, it'd be like people maybe thought it was like a movie about Watergate. I like get serious and they go, and it's like, oh my god, I have to go see it again.
So when was Nixon deposed or whatever? Was it 73?
Yeah, because it wasn't that right after he won in No,
because he won in
72. Which also one of the dumbest political moves like ever.
I know.
Like, he had no chance of losing, and you go like that showed his paranoia. But
but yeah, I mean, it's Deep Throat. That's so funny.
Rough name.
Yeah,
rough name for a guy. It's like, god damn it, it's not even cool.
Yeah, for a guy who's leaking information.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe like he did that to like throw off, like maybe that's like a red herring where it's like, oh hey, whoa, hey man, we're not gonna ask, that's you do your thing, man. I don't know. Moonlight is
I don't know.
But Moonlight is Deep Throat. I don't care, dude.
So one thing, I know I've talked about this before, but so if you want to talk about more like culturally, I do think, and I don't know how far back. I mean, I'm sure we could go all the way back to, I don't know, the Puritans, or even back to Europe, and like our tolerance for sex versus our tolerance for violence.
Right.
We've always had violent movies because, I mean, I guess there's like the Christian morality of sex, and we're a country really, really founded on Puritan religion and like capitalism, cash crops, even to the point that people were like starving to death and dying because they grew tobacco instead of corn and wheat and shit like that. And
Right.
But but you know, like we've always had violence, and it's since I think the beginning of our culture.
Yeah.
There's been, you know, we've had westerns, we've had
Yes.
reenactments of like Roman movies or like Roman times, medieval times, and sex has been so much more taboo and everything. And the example I always love to bring up was, you know, growing up, one of my favorite movies was Starship Troopers.
Right.
Extremely violent movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like super, super violent.
Yeah.
Guys and girls being split in half from what are called arachnids, these alien bugs.
Yeah.
A guy gets his brain sucked out through his skull, like
Yeah.
the top of his skull. People getting their limbs burned off.
Yeah.
There's
Decapitations and shit.
decapitations. Yeah, like really violent shit. And then there's some boobs in it. Like there's
Yeah.
not even really a sex scene. There's
like the beginning of one, and then like a shower scene.
Yeah, and I know that my dad had those scenes with the tits scrambled out of the movie. To me, and at the time, I was like, "Oh, all right, fine." Like I'm 9, but it's like, but I can watch this person get split in half or burned alive, but I can't see a pair of knockers in the shower. And I just really think that speaks so much to what we've tolerated for so long and what we haven't in terms of culture.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I remember being in elementary school and then learning about the Civil War, just like hearing about the casualties of the Civil War and stuff. And it's like, it's totally fine to talk about like tons of people getting killed, but you know, learning about reproduction like that becomes like dicey. So yeah, but I think you're right, though, where it's just like it's just sort of violence is sort of built into our culture. You know, like we've always kind of celebrated like the outlaws and things like that. And
now, but I don't want to. I also think we might be headed in the wrong direction if we go too far in the other. I think that's where parts of our culture are going, and I think that's also wrong and gross.
Right.
There's this weird thing going on that I'll know it when I see it, but it's a combination of adults not wanting to be adults, and hashtag adulting, and just like delaying just being a person, being a human, and infantilizing themselves. And at the same time, these same adults, and they tend to be, I think, liberals in cities with the pajama class liberals in cities, who also then want to hypersexualize children and expose them to very sexual situations at younger and younger ages. And I don't like where this is headed. I think it's really creepy. And it's like these same people who you know, don't want to take responsibility for anything, also want to take away children. Because I do maybe I'm a romantic, but I do think there's like something beautiful and pure about like children's innocence, and I think that should be preserved for a healthy amount of time. I don't think they should be like shut-ins and like completely like I think there should be, and it's tough, and I'm not a parent, and maybe I'll feel differently about this as time goes on, but I think I had a nice balance of that, and I appreciate it, and things were exposed to me, I think, in normal times, and I asked questions, and I learned things, and something, you know, I remember having to listen to the parental advisory CDs of rap songs. I thought it was kind of dumb. And I kind of learned things. I had an older brother who had a big poster of Pamela Anderson on the wall. And we got the swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated. And I kind of just learned things as they came, just normally. It wasn't foisted like upon me. I wasn't pushed into this stuff, which I feel like adults are doing more and more now, in terms of like, look at the issues with books in libraries and like middle school libraries. And I'm thinking, like, I'm sorry, I'm on the side of like, why does this shit need to be in the school?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't think we need to teach kids how to do the stuff, because they'll learn on their own. And I think it's creepy for adults to be spearheading this.
Yeah. And it's weird that it seems to be adults childless millennials in urban areas who are just kind of like, yeah, why not teach children
like
about
how to
anal
give
sex?
a blowjob and stuff. Like, yeah, like what the fuck? Like, I get that it's still like if a kid has a phone at 11,
Mhm.
he can go on Pornhub
Yeah.
like right away, unless maybe there's parental protections, right? But in
Yeah.
theory, they could, and like it'll be confusing and scary, and like maybe it does need to be addressed earlier. I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
this stuff,
Yeah.
but it does seem like there's a faction of the country that really wants to expose kids to this for I don't think for their own sake, like for the children's sake.
Yeah.
And I think that's really creepy. And like I said, I do think innocence should be preserved because like once it's gone, it's gone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think every child deserves that. And there's too much, like in my opinion, there's like life is hard enough, like even in America, even in rich countries, and like a lot of people actually aren't rich. I say we're a rich country, but I think there's a huge dichotomy there.
Yeah.
And I think that like life's hard enough. Like kids have to deal with enough shit.
Yeah.
Like I've seen enough shitty parents.
Yeah.
Really bad situations where the kids have no control and like they're going to be exposed to stuff that is really unfortunate. Like we don't need liberal adults pushing it on them.
Yeah. No.
Like they're gonna watch shows, they're gonna talk to friends. There's always gonna be that friend who has the parents who are more, let's say, liberal, not in politically liberal, but liberal in terms of like less strict.
Yeah.
And they're gonna gravitate to those, and that because that's always what's gonna happen, and that's I think the natural order of things, and that's what should be that's how it should work.
Right. Right.
I don't think kids need to read genderqueer in 5th grade.
I saw some chick post on Twitter. You've probably seen because she got dunked on a lot for this. But she said that she believes that there should be porn made for children. But it would just be, I know it's like it's like a healthy porn, like it's consensual and it's not weird and violent. It's like no.
All porn's consensual unless it's like rape fantasies. Like all porn's consensual.
I guess you wanted to like really.
Wait, did she mean like the children acting?
No. Porn
Okay.
for children,
Jesus
but not
Christ.
with children. No, but she like I think she wants to show like feminist porn where it's like, okay, like does the man ask for consent from the woman? She clearly says yes, she wants it. Okay, cool. Now they're making out, and now he's asking if he can remove it, or where it's like it's all about consent, and let's show kids consensual sex, and it's like
It's also not what women want. Like,
I know,
it's
yeah,
fucking
exactly.
not what they want. Like, that's supposed to dry, boring. Actually, they'll dry up so fucking quick. Like,
I know.
no, obviously you of course, get consent.
Yeah.
And if there's any, I mean, I would tell any young man, any sexually active man, like, just don't. If they're drunk at all, just leave.
Yeah.
Find them another day. Like, it's not worth it.
Right.
Don't do anything like that. Like, just
it's like asking for permission every step of the way. Like
no, like that's not like no one wants that sex life. That's not fun. That's not enjoyable. It's not spontaneous. And I don't know. I'm nervous for both. Like I see all sides of it. Like I see in my line of work, like women who are attacked and raped and violated, and it's really like it fucking sucks.
Yeah,
especially to see people's like lives get ruined. Especially see what happens to children,
right?
Like children just in the middle of this bullshit.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of what I was hinting at before. I guess I'll be more explicit about it. Like just children, like be like I'm like reviewing evidence for a case or something, and it's like there's a kid there, or there's a kid on the recorder on the video. It's like Jesus Christ, like can you get your shit together? Yeah. Like does this have to happen in front of the kids? But no, that's life. So that's what I mean. Like they're going to be exposed to things anyway, and we don't need like public school teachers pushing it on them. And I forgot where I was going with this, but I also see. I think there's also the side where it's like, I think young men or just men in general, like you have to be really careful. Like, and consent is like of course like just regular verbal consent is obviously easy. It's not tricky, but it's not just like consent now and then what does that count for 30 minutes from now? Like it's tough, and if she says stop, then stop. Like that you have to play it safe,
of course.
Like, and if Louis has a joke about this where it's like he's with a girl this a while ago and he was younger, and she was like kind of playing hard to get, and he was like, okay, she's not into me. So he left. And the next time he saw her, she was like, hey, like, what happened the other night? And he's like, what are you talking about? You didn't want to do anything. She's like, no, I was really into it. I just wanted you to like hold me down and fuck me. And he's like, are you insane? Like, are you out of your fucking mind? You just want me to rape you on the off chance that I'm into that? Like, what the hell's the matter with you? It's like, guys, if that's what she's into, then just find someone else. It's totally healthy if you're with this person and they're into that kind of stuff and you role play and it's, of course, that's great. But if the first time you're having a sexual encounter with someone and they're hoping that you just rape them, then this is not someone you want to have any sort of relationship with.
Bill Burr, he's got a bit about that touches on a similar topic. He was kind of talking about how like in the whole like Me Too era, how difficult, how it kind of throws a wrench into like the playful, hard to get, aspect of dating. And he goes, sometimes a guy's with the girl and he starts doing his thing. She's kind of like, no, stop it. You're being so bad. He goes, but the next week when he's being sued for sexual assault. And then you got the guy reading the like, no, stop it. You're being so bad. Stop it. I said, stop. Yes. It's like, well, of course it sounds bad when you read it off a piece of paper in the court of law, but when like in the moment, like it's being playful.
And it's awful that I think like what my position on the hashtag Me Too movement and everything that's gone on is that there's absolutely an issue with men raping, sexually assaulting, attacking women. Like it's gross. And it's definitely the bigger issue. It really is. And I think a handful of people in positions of power were rightfully taken down during it. And I think it did change the discourse in a positive way sometimes. However, another big issue is that many men were wrongfully accused and basically convicted in the court of public opinion without given due process and are ruined lives. And it's kind of like, it's the same. It's not the exact same logic I have with the death penalty, but it's similar in like, not like 98% of people on death row committed those crimes and are guilty, but 2% didn't. Anytime 1 to 2% didn't, and they're gonna, obviously it's extreme, but they're gonna face like the worst punishment imaginable for something they didn't do. And again, that's extreme, but the logic is that like, yes, we are trying to solve this issue of men attacking women, but at the same time, like, you still have to protect this minority victim of the wrongfully accused. And it's gone. I think the tides have shifted more. I think people said like the Amber Heard case like killed the Me Too movement. And but I don't know, as someone like, I see it, I really, really sucks. Like I see it. Like women are just our targets. Like they just are targets far more often of just shit that it's not always sexual assault and rape either. Like those are extremes, but it's just like unwelcome attention. And it's shit that I don't have to deal with. I doubt you have to deal with. And it's really gross. And just like the kind of stuff that women in my life sometimes have to handle, that like they're just trying to go to work. And have to deal with this shit. And I do think that's a problem. But I mean, it is like most issues, it's a push-pull.
Exactly. I remember during like the height of the Me Too movement, there was, I think she was like an editor at Teen Vogue, if I'm not mistaken. And she tweeted out, and I'm glad that she got just piled on for this stupid idea. She says, I don't mind if a few innocent men get, lose their jobs in this because because of the abuses of power and this and that, because that's a price that I'm willing to pay if it means, shifting the tide towards women. But it's like, you're not paying that price though. It's innocent men who are paying that price. Like,
if a man said that, It would still be a dumb thing to say because why do
Exactly,
you get to control? But at least you'd be paying some sort of price if you're one of them and you want to be some like great white man ally. But I assume they were white, but like great white man ally. But you're not even that. Like you're not paying any price actually.
That was the thing. It was just like you're fine paying that price. Like I can live with that on my conscience. A few innocent men being
now change that to change that to like a few innocent like black drug dealers.
Right.
Like okay, a few. Like, are you okay with having some guys who weren't dealing drugs and just like maybe had some personal marijuana on them or something that have their lives ruined because it takes some real drug, like real hardcore guys off the street?
Right.
Like, are you willing to pay that price? Like, well, are you willing to have them pay that price? Like, no, that's never how the approach should be. It should be you have to like attack the problem, but also understand like you can't let things go too far. And we have this concept that's this ill-defined concept, or I don't know if ill-defined is the right term, like malleable concept of due process.
Amorphous.
Due process. And like, what does that mean? And I think the worst perpetrators of due process violations were like college campuses because these were like quasi legal institutions where
especially with the Title IX changes and shit.
Yes, like college and just like business in general, corporations, just nonprofits, whatever, like workplaces, let's say, where it, like an accusation should not be enough. Now, I don't know. Did you see the Justin Roiland thing come out?
Yeah, the Rick and Morty guy.
Well, yeah, he was accused of like severe domestic violence, but the case was dismissed. Now, that doesn't, I mean, that in the court of law, that means you're innocent, you're not guilty, but there could also be technicalities like Bill Cosby's out on a technicality. I don't think anyone would say he's innocent. OJ won his case, so technically he was found not guilty. But like, I don't think anyone really thinks that, or most people don't think that. So I don't know. I haven't looked into it.
Right.
But he was tweeting like he basically tweeted something that said justice at the top, and I don't know. As someone who's a literal domestic violence attorney, I don't want to say right away that he's innocent, and because I deal with victims all the time. But so I want to look into this case because I do love Rick and Morty. Like it's one of my favorite shows, and you hate to see anyone, but you hate to see someone that you look up to or that you appreciate their art or their work be a piece of shit if they are, or be wrongfully accused if they're not. Like either way, it sucks. So
I'm curious. I wonder if it, what the outcome will be. Like, will they bring him back on the show? Because
if he's truly, if it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the evidence is. I don't like people can dismiss cases. I have clients dismiss cases all the time because they're too afraid to go through with it. They don't have, they can't take the time off work. Doesn't mean that they're not victims. Like, it doesn't mean that the guy didn't beat the crap out of them or didn't threaten them or whatever, slash their tires, whatever it is. If they just dismiss the case for whatever reason, that Justin Roiland would still be, there is the court of public opinion for that. So like, people like Bill Cosby, no, like it's like, oh well, he's out, so no, he's good. It's like, no, he's a monster. He got out on technicality.
Did you ever see that movie? Double Jeopardy.
Yeah, I did.
What do you think of the legal aspects of that? I heard it had a very shaky, superficial understanding of the concept of double jeopardy.
Yes, I don't think that's how it would really work. And it's one, it's a fun movie. Ashley Judd, I was always very attracted to her actually. I like how the guy reinvents himself as like a New Orleans Lothario, like with the accent and everything, and and I remember just like I think she's in jail and a cellmate or something like that. It was like
Tommy Lee Jones.
You can't be charged twice for the same. I don't know. I don't do criminal law, and I think double jeopardy is like one of those things that doesn't happen very often. I would assume that's not how it would work. I think I've looked this up.
Yeah, and they're definitely. It's funny because I just looked this up today. I don't know why it kind of popped up. So one. Double jeopardy does exist, but like, for example, like you can be indicted by the state and the federal government at the same time for the same crime. So even if like, the state level, even if like they drop the charges or they choose not, like you can still be indicted by the federal government, or by federal court.
Yeah.
Also, like the way the movie handled it was wrong because so the
I don't
woman
think you get like a license to kill.
exactly because what it is you can't be charged for the same crime. So I was like, okay, so we'll let you off the hook because you did not kill your husband, which we convicted you for. So we'll
In that, yes,
in
that's
that
what
thing.
it is. In
So,
that
but
way,
exactly. So it's like, but she kills him at the end. Spoiler alert. But the movie came out like 20
yes.
years. So she kills him, but it's like that would be a separate crime.
Yes, it's
So
a separate crime. Yeah, you can't. So I think wasn't it they accused? I saw this movie a very long time ago.
yeah.
She like it was on a boat, right?
Yeah. He faked his death
He
and made it
faked his
look like
death on the boat,
she
so like
killed him.
she can't be charged for that crime of killing her husband on the boat. Like those, it's not like you don't get a second bite of the apple, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't mean that he just gets to go shoot him in the head. Like that's a separate crime. It is, yes, it's murder of Joe Smith or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it's a separate crime. So that, yes, it's not like you can't be charged under the same like statute or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like twice. Yeah.
We let you off the hook for robbing at liquor store in 1992, but so that means going forward, like you can rob any liquor store
Right.
after
Yes,
1992, and you're good.
That's what it is.
But I remember even as a kid, because that movie came when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I remember
Yeah.
watching it and be like, so that's like one of the few ways that you can get with murder, like you get away with that. Okay, maybe I need to find somebody I don't like, and so I can be convicted of murdering them without murdering.
It's more like, let's use OJ again. It's like, okay, OJ gets tried, just like it happens, found not guilty. But let's say like quote unquote like smoking gun evidence comes out later, for the same crime of killing Nicole Brown Simpson, like then he cannot be charged. I don't believe so. Even if new evidence comes out, he can't be charged. Like that's why prosecutors don't just take every case to trial. They're like, well, there's not enough evidence because if we don't have it, we lose. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have to, put a case together that we think will reasonably win.
Would they be able to charge you with like another aspect of that same crime that they didn't charge you with before?
No, I don't think it's like, oh, well, you charged me with first degree and you didn't get that, so now I'm gonna just try and charge you with manslaughter. Like, no, you have to bring all the claims together.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's not like that happens. It's called the entire controversy doctrine. I'm actually doing a case with that right now.
Oh, wild.
You have to, again, I don't know the criminal stuff, and none of this should be taken as legal advice, by the way. I really, my criminal law knowledge is really from law school and pop culture, and like interest. I don't do any of this as a professional. But in civil law, it's like if you and I, let's say you punch me, right? And and you punch me and you break my laptop. I don't know. You punch me and you break my laptop, and I sue you for punching me, like civilly. For the damages that you did to my body. Then, and I win there, or I lose, or whatever we settle. Then I can't go and be like, oh, now I'm suing you for the laptop. Like it has to be all brought together.
Gotcha. Interesting.
To avoid like piecemeal litigation.
We should do an episode on the legal stuff portrayed in movies and
I would love, like, I actually love legal dramas. I love legal movies. I think they're, sometimes I love them because they're so ridiculous. And sometimes I love them because they're really fun and like interesting. And I do like when I'm in court, sometimes I take my glasses off and I drop them on the table. I do take a few steps and turn around and ask one final question. It's fun. Like I did that recently. Like I've one final question for you. Or whatever it is, or but yes, we could do a whole legal movie episode. Some of my favorites, Rainmaker's good. Very unrealistic, but very good. He's studying for the bar exam while also handling like a huge litigation, like civil litigation suit as a law, basically like a associate. It's just like ridiculous, but very, very fun movie. Like a civil action is good. The verdict, verdict's good, but there's not like, the verdict isn't like a courtroom drama. It's a legal drama, but it's not like a courtroom drama.
12 Angry Men. Well, but that's more of a deliberation room.
Again, it's all like law related. I remember the movie pissing me off a lot when I was a kid. I think because I was like very conservative, and like clearly this guy did it, and like you can like, it's like you don't need like it doesn't need to be irrefutable to convict someone. It's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And like the guy just kept kind of, I think, making like ridiculous arguments and like I don't know. I haven't seen it in a while. Maybe I'd feel totally different. It was on a list of movies I watched recently. That was like the best. I was looking up like screenwriting. Best like written scripts, and it's a very cool concept. There's a movie I should revisit.
Liar, Liar. It's a pretty good one.
Liar, Liar. Yeah, that's great because he's a lawyer and he can't lie. That's amazing. But yeah, I would love to do a legal movie. Tough one is, which honestly I think is actually pretty restrained on family law, is Kramer versus Kramer.
Oh yeah.
Just how horrible family law is.
Yeah.
I do like part of family law. I don't do the other parts of it, which are just miserable.
Yeah.
I do a pretty bad part though too. But anyway, I need to think about some of those because there's a lot of good ones and some very, very bad ones too.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about Obscenity? I know you did a lot of research on this, just watching porn. I told you.
Watching it until I know it.
There it is. There it is again.
It went in. There was one little thing I want to talk a little bit about.
Hit me. Hit me, baby.
A lot of the controversies around the portrayal of sex in films tend to be from the more like religious or conservative side, and oftentimes it's more like a reaction where it's just sort of like just the fact that there's sex portrayed in this movie is bothersome to us. And it reminded me of a quote from this is from Roger Ebert from his review for The Doom Generation. I don't know if you've heard of that or seen it. Came out in the mid 90s.
I don't know it now.
It's one of the most 90s movies ever. It's just like it's a movie that Beavis and Butthead would have written. Like it's so apathetic. It's basically like a teenage version of
this is like the hard Gen X.
Yeah, it's super Gen X. It's like Natural Born Killers. It's basically that. It's like a roadhouse, not a roadhouse, a road movie, but with teenagers, and they go on a murder rampage across the U.S.
Okay,
it's a weird movie. I mean, it's very stylish and edgy, but it's also sort of like I don't know what the point of this, because like there are other. I don't know why road movies were so big in the '90s, especially like Killers on the Run. So because you also have like California with a K.
I think it was like I feel like in the 90s there was almost nostalgia, which happens all the time, like for the 60s. And I think it was instead of the hippie road, it was like it was more like the apathetic but like listlessness, where the hippies I think had somewhat more of an ideology, and it was like the free love, free drugs, definitely rebellion. I think 90s was
a little more nihilistic.
It was just nihilistic, like, well, we had nothing else to do.
Exactly. But the movie had a lot of sex and violence in it, and so Roger Ebert famously gave this 0 stars, not because he didn't like it, but it was like I don't know how to degrade this movie. But there's a quote from him that I like where he's commenting on sort of like the sex and violence of the movie. He says, "Note carefully that I do not object to the content of this movie, but to the attitude. Content is neutral until shaped by approach and style." And I really like that, especially as a storyteller, because sometimes when I'm writing horror, sometimes I dive into a topic that's uncomfortable for me, but I'm also sort of like, but don't let your emotions get in the way. It's like because it also depends on what you're trying to say with the story. Like, are you celebrating violence and sex, and or are you condemning it? Are you trying? But it's just like don't be put off by it, but just like treat it like it's a story element, and try to treat. So even if it goes into a really weird dark place, if it's necessary to the tone of the film, to the tone of the story, then put it in. Don't shy away from it. It reminds me, I might have brought this novella up. It came in the late 1800s. It's called The Great God Pan. It's a kind of a pre-Lovecraftian horror story. But the sexual element is so tame, but it is pretty extreme. It's pretty bizarre, but it all takes place behind closed doors. But it was very controversial when it came out in
Is it American?
English, actually, UK, during the Victorian era. It was very controversial when it came out, but the author was actually very Christian, and so it's interesting because he was like, my story, it's meant to condemn illicit sex. It's not. It's like I'm not celebrating sex. So why are you guys getting offended by the fact like you're just offended by the fact that there's sex in my story, but you're not looking at what the actual message, which is I'm trying to condemn illicit and aberrant sex.
Yeah, the whole religious part to it is weird to me because in the Bible it's like spread your seed, like go forth and like basically go make more Christians.
Right.
Now I think the argument now would be, well, this isn't about making children because we have birth control. So we get that. I understand actually the criticism from the religious right more now than back then, because then it was like, no, we're just making more Christians. We're making, you know, so I don't know. Very, very strange.
Yeah.
I'm listening to a podcast right now about, it's actually really gross. This murderer and friend. I don't like just like murderer podcasts. Like I'm not. I love Last Podcast on the Left, but I'm not really into just like the profiles of these murderers. This one I like because it's about medieval France. And this really disturbing guy who actually like shared a battlefield with Joan of Arc and like kind of supported her and was actually a really good warrior. He's a noble, but he also fucked children. So like there's that part. And just like a really sick guy. And there have been some theories like he actually didn't do that and they just slandered him because he was gay. And I don't know. I think the evidence is they did one episode so far. It's going to be multi-episode, like a lot of their show like episodes. But I forgot where I was going. Why am I talking about this guy?
Religious.
Oh yeah, the religious. Like so there's such an emphasis on like virginity, like for women, like such emphasis on virginity, and I don't even in the movie I'm watching now, Satanic Panic. They have to sacrifice a virgin, and like the pizza delivery girl is a virgin, and she like stumbles into this cult or whatever, and you know, shit ensues.
Yeah. But cool. This was a good 69th episode, and I'm glad we get to keep our clothes on. Like I know we were going back and forth about how nude we should do it.
Yeah,
but
that'd have been hot.
Well, all right.
The naked app. A lot of nipples.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening to this ribald episode.
This sweaty, sexy episode.
Stay reckless, fight the crits.
Fight the crits.
Bye.